Martha had always loved mornings. The sun rising slowly over her small house gave her a feeling of peace. She wore her favorite blue apron and stepped into her garden, where rows of bright flowers swayed gently in the soft breeze. Her hands moved carefully as she planted new seeds, making sure each one was set in the soil just right. She hummed a little tune, thinking about the day ahead. Her neighborhood was usually very calm. Birds chirped from the trees, and the distant sound of children playing often reached her ears. Most of the neighbors were kind people, and Martha knew everyone by name. She enjoyed simple things like watering her plants, greeting passing neighbors, and sitting on her porch in the afternoon with a cup of tea. That morning, everything seemed ordinary. Martha reached for her watering can and poured water gently over the flowers she had planted the day before. Suddenly, she noticed two men walking up her driveway. They were dressed in uniforms, and their serious expressions made her heart beat faster. Martha stood up straight, trying to stay calm. She did not understand why they were there. "Good morning," Martha said politely. Her voice was soft but steady. "Can I help you?" One of the officers, a tall man with a serious face, spoke first. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about your property." Martha's hands froze on her watering can. She had lived in this house for more than 30 years, and she had never had any trouble with anyone. She tried to smile politely, hoping that would make the officers understand she was not a threat. "I do not know why you would need to question me," Martha said. "I have lived here a long time, and I always follow the rules. Everything in my home and garden is mine, and I know my neighbors well." The other officer, slightly shorter and holding a notebook, looked around as if he did not believe her. His eyes moved quickly from her garden to her house. "We received a report, ma'am. We just want to ask a few questions to make sure everything is in order," he said. His tone was calm but firm. Martha nodded slowly. She did not want to make the situation worse. "I understand," she said. "Please feel free to ask your questions, but I would like to know what the report was about." The first officer sighed and stepped a little closer. "It is part of our routine. Just a few questions about who lives here and what you are doing. We need to make sure there is no problem." Martha's heart beat faster. She felt a mix of fear and confusion. She had never been treated like this before. She looked at the officers, trying to read their expressions. They seemed serious, but she did not see any reason for such strict behavior. From the edge of the street, a few neighbors watched quietly. They whispered to each other, concerned about what was happening. Martha could feel their eyes on her, but she focused on staying calm. She did not want to panic in front of the officers. She took a deep breath and tried to answer politely, keeping her voice steady. "Like I said, I live here with respect for everyone," Martha explained. "I have always been friendly with neighbors and careful about my garden. I do not understand why there is a problem." The officers exchanged a glance. It was clear they had questions that they were not ready to share. Martha felt uneasy, but she stood firmly. She loved her home and her garden, and she would not leave just because someone tried to intimidate her. As the morning sun grew brighter, Martha tried to keep herself busy with the flowers, hoping the officers would explain the situation soon. She wondered if someone had made a mistake. She wondered why her peaceful day had turned into this. She hoped that everything could be solved with calm words and honesty. Martha tried to continue working in her garden, but her mind could not focus on the flowers. The two officers were standing on her porch, their eyes scanning every corner of her property. She felt a mix of worry and frustration. She had never experienced anything like this before. One officer cleared his throat and spoke again. "Ma'am, we need you to answer some questions about the people who come and go from this house," he said. Martha's hands tightened around her watering can. She did not know what he meant. "I live alone most of the time," she said carefully. "My neighbors visit sometimes, and my children come to see me occasionally." "Is there a problem with that?" The shorter officer made a note in his notebook. "We received reports about unusual activity here," he said. His voice was steady but formal. "We just want to make sure everything is safe." Martha shook her head gently. "Unusual activity? I do not understand. I have lived here peacefully for years. I take care of my garden and my home. I know all my neighbors. Nothing unusual happens here." The taller officer looked at her more closely. "We have to follow our procedures, ma'am," he said. "It is important for safety. Can you tell us if anyone has stayed here overnight recently?" Martha blinked. She could feel her heartbeat getting faster. "Only my son visits sometimes," she said. He stays for a few hours and then goes home. That is all. I do not have anyone else staying here. The shorter officer looked up from his notebook and asked another question. Do you have any deliveries or packages arriving regularly? Yes, just normal mail, Martha replied. Sometimes I order small things online like seeds for my garden or books to read. Everything is ordinary. The officers nodded, but their expressions did not soften. Martha could feel the tension in the air. She wanted to ask them why they were treating her this way, but she knew it would not help. She tried to stay polite and calm. I am happy to answer your questions, she said, but I would like to know why there is a problem. I have always followed the rules. The taller officer sighed and looked at the shorter one. It is just a routine check, he said finally. We cannot always explain everything at the moment. We need to ask questions first. Martha felt a little relieved, but the worry in her chest did not go away. She had never been questioned like this before. She thought about her son Daniel, who usually helped her with difficult situations. She hoped he would arrive soon because she did not want to face this alone. While Martha tried to stay calm, the officers continued to ask more questions. They asked about her neighbors, about who might come by unexpectedly, and about any recent visitors she had seen. Each question felt like a test, and Martha answered as honestly and politely as she could. I have seen all my neighbors recently, she said. Everyone is friendly and kind. No one has caused trouble here. I promise everything is normal. The officers paused for a moment, looking around the yard. One of them tapped on his notebook as if he was thinking. Martha could feel their hesitation. She hoped that they would understand that she was telling the truth. The quiet neighborhood seemed different now. The birds were still singing, but their voices sounded distant. The sun shone on her flowers, but Martha barely noticed. Her heart was focused on the officers and their questions. She wanted to believe that honesty and calm words could solve this problem. Martha straightened her back and smiled gently, trying to show the officers that she meant no harm. She hoped that her calmness would help them see that there was no reason for fear or suspicion. As the questions continued, Martha realized that this situation would not end soon unless someone came to support her. She thought of Daniel and hoped he would arrive quickly. She felt a small spark of hope, knowing that he would help her stay safe and respected. Martha continued to answer their questions politely, her voice steady even as her mind raced. She knew she had to remain strong and patient, hoping that honesty and calm words would eventually bring peace back to her quiet morning. Martha felt her hands grow cold as the officers continued to ask questions. Their serious faces and sharp tones made the peaceful morning feel heavy and strange. She tried to focus on the flowers in front of her, but her mind kept returning to the officer's words. She had never experienced anything like this before, and the situation was making her nervous. The taller officer, whose name tag read Miller, stepped closer to the porch. Ma'am, can you tell us exactly who comes to visit your home? He asked again, his tone firm. Martha's heart beat faster. She had already answered this question, but he continued pressing. I have already told you, Martha said calmly, though she felt the worry growing inside her. Only my neighbors sometimes, and my son visits occasionally. That is all. No one else comes here. The shorter officer holding the notebook frowned. Can you give us names, ma'am? We need details, Martha thought carefully. She knew it was important to answer honestly. Yes, I know my neighbors well. There is Mrs. Lewis, who lives across the street, Mr. Brown next door, and of course my son Daniel visits sometimes. That is everyone who comes by. The officers exchanged a quick look. Martha could see the doubt in their eyes. She felt a wave of frustration mixed with fear. Why could they not see that she was telling the truth? She had always been honest and kind, and she could not understand why she was being treated this way. She straightened her back and spoke again, trying to keep her voice steady. I have lived in this neighborhood for many years. I know everyone. I have never caused any problems. Please believe me when I say everything here is normal. Miller sighed and tapped his pen against the notebook. We just need to be sure, ma'am, he said. It is our job to check. We cannot take chances. Martha nodded, but she felt a growing tension in her chest. The officer's presence was making her feel small and worried. She looked around her quiet street, hoping that someone might come by and see what was happening. Her neighbors were watching from their porches, their faces full of concern, but no one came forward yet. As the questions continued, Martha felt a mixture of sadness and determination. She loved her home and her garden, and she could not let fear take over her morning. She spoke clearly and calmly. answering each question as honestly as she could. "I have nothing to hide," Martha said softly. "I have always lived quietly and peacefully. My neighbors can tell you the same. Please understand that I am not causing any trouble." The officers paused again, looking around the yard. Miller's expression softened slightly, but the other officers still seemed unsure. Martha felt a small flicker of hope that perhaps her honesty was making a difference. Even though she tried to stay calm, her thoughts kept returning to her son. Daniel had always been protective of her and had a way of making difficult situations easier. If he were here, she knew he would help explain everything and make the officers understand. She wished he would arrive soon. While Martha focused on the officers, the quiet neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. The birds were singing, but their songs felt distant. The flowers in her garden swayed gently in the morning breeze, and Martha tried to pay attention to them, hoping it would help her stay calm. Martha took a deep breath and straightened her back. She could not show fear or panic, no matter how nervous she felt. She knew that staying calm and polite was the best way to handle the situation. She continued answering the officers' questions carefully, keeping her voice steady and her hands still. Hours did not pass, but it felt long to Martha. The officers continued to ask questions, and she answered everyone with honesty and patience. She prayed silently that her son would arrive soon. She felt a spark of hope, knowing that Daniel's presence could change everything and help her feel safe again. Martha reminded herself to remain calm and strong. She loved her home, her garden, and her peaceful life. No matter how difficult the situation seemed, she would not give up or show fear. She would wait patiently, answering honestly until someone arrived to support her. Martha was starting to feel tired from answering the officers' repeated questions. Her arms ached from holding the watering can and moving the soil, and her voice was beginning to sound small and strained. She had done nothing wrong, yet the officers' serious expressions made her feel trapped. She wished she could disappear into her cozy home, away from the tension. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk made her heart leap. She turned quickly and saw a familiar figure walking toward her house. It was Daniel, her son. His tall frame moved with confidence, and his calm face carried a sense of determination. Martha felt an immediate wave of relief. "Daniel!" she called softly, her voice filled with hope. Daniel noticed the officers first. He stopped a few steps from the porch, his eyes observing carefully. He could see his mother standing in the garden, looking nervous but holding herself with dignity. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Good morning," Daniel said firmly, his voice polite but clear. "I am Martha's son, Daniel. I believe there is a misunderstanding here. Can someone explain why my mother is being questioned like this?" The taller officer, Miller, straightened and looked at Daniel. His eyes shifted between the mother and son, as if realizing a new presence had changed the situation. "We received reports about unusual activity, sir," he said. "We are just asking questions to ensure everything is safe." Daniel's calm confidence did not waver. He nodded slowly. "I understand you are doing your job, but my mother is an honest and respected member of this community. She has lived here for many years and has never caused trouble. I would like to know more about these reports before we continue." The shorter officer hesitated, flipping through his notebook. Daniel took a step closer, his eyes steady but kind. His calm demeanor seemed to shift the atmosphere immediately. Martha watched silently, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. She knew her son would handle the situation with respect, but she also knew he would not allow anyone to intimidate her. "I can answer your questions," Daniel continued, "but I want to make sure this is done with respect and fairness. My mother has done nothing wrong, and she deserves to be treated with kindness." Miller glanced at his partner, then back at Daniel. For the first time, his serious expression softened. He could see that Daniel's presence had changed the balance. The mother, who had been nervous and small under their questioning, now had her son standing with her, offering support and protection. Daniel stepped onto the porch, keeping a safe distance but clearly signaling that he was there to help. "Please tell me exactly what unusual activity you believe has happened," he said. "We can solve this calmly, but my mother should not feel afraid or pressured." Martha felt a warmth in her chest. Her son's words carried authority without anger. She realized how much safer she felt with him there. The officers' stern expressions began to shift as they realized the situation was changing. The neighbors, who had been watching quietly from across the street, started to relax slightly. They could see that Martha was no longer alone, and that her son was handling the situation with care. Some whispered to each other, impressed by Daniel's calm confidence. Miller finally spoke again. "We will need to review the report and clarify the details," he said, his tone less sharp than before. "We may have acted too quickly. Your presence changes things, sir." Daniel nodded, acknowledging the officer's words. He turned to his mother and gave her a reassuring smile. Martha felt her shoulders relax for the first time in what felt like hours. With Daniel by her side, she knew that the confusion and tension could be handled properly. "Thank you for coming, Daniel," Martha said softly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with relief. "You do not need to worry, Mother," Daniel replied. "I am here. Everything will be fine." The morning sun shone brighter as the tension slowly began to ease. The officers now seemed more careful in their words, realizing that they had underestimated the importance of respect and understanding. Martha watched the scene unfold, her heart filling with hope that peace would return to her quiet neighborhood. Daniel stood firmly on the porch, his eyes meeting the officers with a steady, confident gaze. His presence alone seemed to change the energy around the house. Martha felt a wave of relief, knowing that her son was there to help guide the situation calmly. She watched silently, trusting him to speak for both of them. "I understand that you are doing your job," Daniel said politely, his voice calm but strong, "but I must ask that you treat my mother with respect. She has lived here for many years and has always been an honest and responsible member of this community." The taller officer, Miller, shifted slightly, glancing at his partner before speaking. "We received reports about unusual activity, sir. We are just following procedure," he said. His tone was still formal, but Daniel noticed that it lacked the harshness it had before. Daniel nodded. "I understand procedures are important," he said, "but assumptions and quick judgments can create fear and hurt. My mother has done nothing wrong. She has always followed the rules and treated her neighbors with kindness. I am asking you to listen carefully before making any decisions." The shorter officer looked down at his notebook, flipping pages slowly. He seemed uncertain now, as if Daniel's calm approach was making him rethink the situation. Daniel continued, speaking clearly and with patience. "Respect is the key to solving problems," he said. "You can ask questions and follow procedures, but it should be done in a way that does not intimidate or frighten someone who has done nothing wrong. My mother deserves that respect, as do all members of this community." Martha felt her chest relax as she listened to her son. His words were firm but gentle, and she realized that this was the way to resolve the situation. She had always taught Daniel to speak calmly and honestly, and now she saw how powerful those lessons were. Miller rubbed his forehead, looking thoughtful. "You're right," he said after a pause. "We may have acted too quickly. We should have approached the situation with more care." Daniel nodded, acknowledging the officer's words. "Thank you," he said. "I am not angry. I just want to make sure my mother feels safe and respected. That is all I ask." The shorter officer finally looked up from his notebook. His expression had softened, and he seemed to realize the impact of their earlier behavior. "We will review the report carefully," he said. "We should have gathered more information before coming here." Daniel gave a small smile. "That is all I ask," he said. "Listening and understanding can prevent unnecessary fear. My mother has lived here peacefully for many years, and we hope to continue that way." Martha felt tears of relief welling in her eyes. She could not remember the last time she had felt so supported and safe. Daniel had handled the situation without anger or shouting, but with firmness and wisdom. She knew that this was the turning point that would restore calm to her home. The officers exchanged glances again, and Daniel noticed a subtle change in their body language. They were no longer pressing with suspicion or doubt. Instead, they were listening, considering the situation with more thoughtfulness. "Thank you for explaining everything clearly," Miller said. "We will make sure to approach situations like this more carefully in the future." "Your words have been helpful." Daniel nodded once more. "I am glad to hear that. Respect and understanding should guide every interaction. That is all I ask for my mother and for this neighborhood." Martha stepped closer to Daniel, feeling safe and proud. The tension that had filled the morning slowly began to fade. She realized how important it was to remain calm and honest, even when faced with fear or uncertainty. Her son had shown her that courage could come in many forms, and sometimes it only took one person to change the outcome of a difficult situation. The neighborhood, which had watched silently from a distance, seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The officers now appeared thoughtful and careful, understanding that their approach had a real impact on the people they served. Martha returned to her garden, watering the flowers carefully while keeping an eye on the officers. She smiled quietly to herself, knowing that peace was returning. Daniel stood beside her, offering reassurance with his calm presence. Together, they had turned a tense and uncertain morning into a lesson in patience, respect, and understanding. After Daniel's calm words, the officers paused for a moment, clearly reflecting on the situation. Martha felt a gentle relief washing over her, but she knew the morning was not fully over. There were still conversations to be had, explanations to give, and understanding to build. She stayed close to Daniel, feeling safe and proud of how gracefully he had handled everything. Miller, the taller officer, took a deep breath and looked at both Martha and Daniel. "We realize that we acted too quickly," he said. "It is important to follow procedures, but it is equally important to approach people with respect and patience. We may have caused fear unnecessarily, and for that we apologize." Martha's eyes softened as she listened. She nodded gently, appreciating the honesty. "Thank you," she said. "I know your job can be difficult, and I understand the need to keep everyone safe. I just hope that in the future, people are treated with kindness while you do your work." Daniel added, "That is exactly what we hope. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their home. Understanding and patience can prevent unnecessary fear. My mother has lived here peacefully for decades, and we want that to continue." The shorter officer, who had been quieter throughout the morning, finally spoke up. "You are right," he said. "We should have asked questions more carefully. We learned an important lesson today about how our actions affect the people we serve." Martha felt a sense of pride and relief. She realized that the morning, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, was turning into a moment of growth for everyone involved. Her son had shown courage, calmness, and wisdom, and the officers were beginning to understand how their behavior impacted others. Daniel smiled at his mother and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "See, Mother," he said gently, "sometimes people need guidance and patience. Speaking with respect can change even the toughest situations." Martha nodded. She looked at the officers with kindness. "I hope that today helps you remember the importance of understanding and listening," she said. "People respond better when they feel safe and respected. That is a lesson for everyone." The officers listened attentively. They nodded, acknowledging her words. Martha noticed that their expressions had softened and the earlier tension was gone. It was clear that they were reflecting seriously on the events of the morning. Outside, the neighborhood had begun to return to its usual quiet rhythm. The children's laughter drifted down the street and birds sang from the trees. The community had watched everything unfold, and now they saw that fairness and understanding had won the day. Martha returned to her flowers, carefully planting new seeds with a sense of peace. Daniel stayed close, making sure she was comfortable and calm. She realized that courage was not always about loud words or quick actions. Sometimes it was about patience, honesty, and standing firm while remaining kind. The officers spoke quietly to each other, reviewing the report and the morning's events. Martha listened from a distance, knowing that they had learned something important. Their actions had changed because someone had spoken calmly, respectfully, and truthfully. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Martha felt a warmth in her heart. She realized that her morning had turned into a lesson for everyone. Fear could be replaced with understanding, tension could be eased with calm words, and respect could transform difficult moments into opportunities for learning. Daniel smiled down at her. "Everything is going to be okay now, Mother," he said. "Today showed that honesty, calmness, and respect can make a real difference." Martha smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She looked around at her garden, at the quiet street, and at the officers who were now preparing to leave. The morning had begun with fear, but it ended with understanding, growth, and a restored sense of peace. She realized that this day would remain in her memory, not for the fear, but for the lesson learned. It was a reminder that even small acts of patience, honesty, and calm words could change the course of a situation and teach everyone involved something valuable. Martha turned back to Daniel, her heart full. "Thank you for being here," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "Always, Mother. That is what family is for." The sun continued to shine, Flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and Martha felt a renewed sense of safety and hope. She knew that respect, understanding, and calm courage had made all the difference. The officers finally stepped back from Martha's porch, their expressions thoughtful. The tension that had filled the morning was gone, replaced by a quiet understanding. Martha felt her shoulders relax, and she took a deep breath, enjoying the peace that had returned to her home. Her garden seemed brighter, the flowers swaying gently in the morning sun as if celebrating the calm that had returned. Daniel stayed close to his mother, his presence steady and reassuring. He had watched carefully as the officers left, making sure that his mother felt safe. Martha felt a warmth in her heart. She realized how important it was to have someone stand by her in difficult moments. Today had been challenging, but with calmness and respect, they had turned it into a lesson for everyone. The neighbors, who had been observing from their porches and yards, began to step outside more openly. Mrs. Lewis, who lived across the street, approached Martha with a gentle smile. "I'm glad everything is okay now," she said. "It seemed tense for a while, but I am happy to see you safe." Martha nodded and smiled back. "Thank you, Mrs. Lewis," she replied. "I am grateful for your concern. It is comforting to know that neighbors care about one another." Mr. Brown from next door came forward as well. "You handled the situation with grace," he said to Martha. "And your son's calm words helped everyone understand what respect really means." Martha felt a deep sense of pride. She looked at Daniel, who smiled quietly in response. "It was all about staying calm and honest," Daniel said softly. "Respect and patience can change any situation, Mother." Martha nodded. "You have shown me the importance of speaking calmly and standing up with kindness," she said. "I am proud of you, Daniel." The officers, now at the edge of the street, looked back one more time. Miller, the taller officer, gave a small nod toward Martha and Daniel. "We will be more careful in the future," he said. "This morning reminded us that understanding people is just as important as following procedures." The shorter officer added, "We appreciate your honesty and patience. We have learned a valuable lesson today." With that, they walked away, leaving the neighborhood peaceful once again. Martha returned to her garden, picking up her watering can and tending to the flowers with gentle care. The soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, and the morning sun warmed her face. Daniel knelt beside her, helping with a few stubborn weeds. They worked together in silence for a moment, simply enjoying the quiet and the beauty around them. The earlier tension felt like a distant memory, replaced by the satisfaction of knowing that calmness, patience, and respect had won the day. Neighbors stopped to greet Martha as they went about their morning routines. Some shared kind words, expressing relief and admiration for how she and Daniel had handled the situation. Martha felt a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that even in moments of fear, honesty, patience, and kindness could transform a tense situation into a positive experience. "Today was a reminder," Daniel said, looking at his mother. "Even when people misunderstand or act quickly, calm words and respect can teach everyone something important." Martha smiled, planting a new row of seeds in her garden. "You have shown me that courage is not always loud," she said. "Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and gentle." Today proved that kindness and honesty can make a real difference. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and Martha felt a sense of peace she had not experienced that morning. Her garden glowed with color, the neighbors were calm, and her home was safe once again. She knew that life would continue peacefully, and the lessons learned today would remain in her heart. Daniel stood and stretched, brushing the soil from his hands. "Shall we have some tea, Mother?" he asked. Martha nodded with a smile. "Yes, let us sit and enjoy it together. Today has taught us that even the hardest moments can end with understanding and peace." As they walked inside, the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm. Children played in the yards, birds sang in the trees, and the morning sun shone on Martha's little house. She felt grateful for her son, for her neighbors, and for the calm that had been restored. The morning that had begun with fear and tension ended with a valuable lesson for everyone. Honesty, patience, and respect could overcome misunderstanding, and calm courage could change the outcome of any situation. Martha felt at peace, knowing that her home, her garden, and her life were safe and full of hope. The officers nodded, visibly changed by the encounter. They realized that assumptions and intimidation could create fear and hurt within the community. Daniel's calm and respectful approach showed them the importance of listening and understanding before acting. Martha smiled, feeling proud of her son for standing up for her without escalating the situation. One of the officers, Officer Miller, began to speak differently, asking questions with more respect and less accusation. He apologized for the misunderstanding and admitted they had acted on incomplete information. Martha watched silently, relieved that her son had arrived in time to support her. Daniel encouraged the officers to approach situations like this with patience and respect in the future. Daniel explained that his mother was a respected member of the community, known for her kindness and honesty. He asked the officers to step back and reassess the situation. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they might have overstepped. Daniel's tone was firm but non-threatening, and it was clear he wouldn't let the situation escalate without accountability. Just as the tension was reaching its peak, the front door opened. Martha's son, Daniel, a tall and confident man, stepped onto the porch. He had been on his way to visit her and noticed the commotion. Daniel's presence brought immediate relief to Martha. He greeted the officers calmly but firmly, asking why they were treating his mother with such hostility. Martha tried to stay calm as the officers continued pressing her. Their tone seemed sharper now, and she felt a mix of fear and frustration. She couldn't understand why she was being treated this way. The neighbors watching from a distance whispered among themselves, concerned about the unfairness of the situation. Martha's voice remained steady as she asked politely if they could clarify why they were questioning her so closely. Officer Miller spoke first. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions about this property." Martha's hands trembled slightly. She had always followed the rules and had never had trouble with anyone. She explained politely that she had lived there for decades and knew all her neighbors well. The officers didn't seem convinced and began asking more pointed questions, making her feel uneasy. Martha, a gentle elderly woman, lived in a peaceful neighborhood. She loved tending her small garden and greeting neighbors with a warm smile. That morning, she was planting flowers when she noticed two uniformed officers approaching. Their expressions were stern and Martha's heart sank. She didn't understand why they had come, but she stood tall, hoping her calm demeanor would show she meant no harm. With the tension gone, the officers left, this time with a promise to approach neighbors more thoughtfully. Martha returned to her garden, planting her flowers with renewed peace of mind. Daniel stayed by her side, ensuring she felt safe. Neighbors came over to check on her, expressing relief and admiration for how gracefully the situation had been resolved. That day, Martha realized that courage could come in many forms, and sometimes it only took one person to change the course of an encounter.